One is Enough by Flora. Chapter 6. Mike went back to his wife feeling very bad indeed. He was right in what he thought. Amaka was having a bad influence on his wife and it must stop. What was Amaka doing in the father's house? If she wanted anything from the priest, was it not cautious, expected even, that she should come to them and not directly to the priest's house? Amaka met the father in their home. Amaka was up to something. Mike was not going to allow it. But then, he did not know how to approach his wife on the matter. He did not want to upset her. Surely, their marriage had the usual problems, but they had stuck together for 20 years. That was a long time for two people to be married and have stayed together. Mike not only loved his wife, but respected her. He respected her views and he never deliberately hurt her. He was good to her. Of course, he occasionally strayed like all men, but the affairs did not last. For one thing, he was too busy, so he did not find time to have extramarital activities. He wondered why men did it, and his conclusion was that the men who were involved in it were unhappy at home and wanted a place, a neutral ground for relaxation, which they could not find at home. So this strange behavior of his wife surprised him. Adaobi did not like to be involved in business. She had always said that she did not have the nerve to do business. She always said that business was insecure. A government job was secure. She had her salary each month and she budgeted very well. She never complained of the housekeeping money her husband gave her. If it was not enough, her husband did not know. But like a good husband that Mike was, he from time to time bought his wife expensive presents and always delighted in giving her a surprise. What was happening now to Adaobi? Adaobi! Mike heard himself calling his wife. Yes, Mike. We haven't heard from John lately. John? Oh, he's fine. I received a letter from him 2 days ago. What did they say of the boarding house? Oh, he said he loved the food. The boys are friendly and... Did he say he was missing home? Oh, Mike, how can he say that? I miss him. So do I. There was an awkward silence. Adaobi was busy getting ready for work. Mike wanted to take it easy that morning, so he was relaxed. Adaobi knew that he was up to something, but did not know how to introduce the subject. She waited. She was still thinking of her friend Amaka and her good fortune. She wasn't sure what she wanted to do yet. 3,000 naira is a lot of money to get in just under 2 months. She would register a company and ask her husband's friends to help secure some business for her. She could then ask Amaka to take on the job and they would share the profits. No, she was not going to get directly involved with supply. Well, in that case, she thought there was no need to register a company. Amaka already had one. They could use that. Darling, Adaobi heard her husband call. I saw Amaka at the father's the other day. How long ago? Adaobi asked without interest, but the sharpness of the answer did not escape her husband. What's the matter, Adaobi? Adaobi feigned surprise. What have I done wrong? Mike there and then concluded that there was something really wrong. You said you saw Amaka. Was it wrong to say I saw Amaka? No, darling. But when I said I saw her, you immediately became defensive. Defensive? I said defensive. You were about to defend yourself against what I was about to say. Well, let me say it now, since we have got this far. I don't like your association with Amaka, and I want it to stop. I don't want any explanations. I don't want you to be hostile to her. If she comes here, we shall welcome her, but you are not to visit her or to help us secure any contracts, because I am not very sure what she's up to. I met her by accident at the father's house. I don't like it. They say these Biafran women have a way of getting to men in high positions. Read the papers where women are crying that these girls from Biafra were snatching their husbands from them. And just what are these wives doing when the girls are snatching their husbands, sitting back and allowing it to happen? Adaobi said, and Mike was impressed. Are you going to put up a fight for me if a Biafran girl wants to snatch me from you, Adaobi? A Biafran girl dare not in the first place. But that is neither here nor there. Those husbands who are snatched are those who want to be snatched, said Adobe. If you are unhappy at home and discontented, then you could be snatched. But if you are well taken care of like I am taking care of you, why should you be snatched? Mike was happy to hear this theory, but he knew that the world was not all that simple. There were terrible complications. He had had several affairs with girls before he finally married Adobe, and he was surprised that she was a virgin. But then, from what he had heard about other people, especially husbands, virgins did not make particularly good wives. But like a man, his ego shot up high. He was the first to see between Adobe's legs. No other man had had the privilege. He was flattered, and again, Adobe had proved a good wife. He was blessed. That was all the more reason why he was worried about these new and strange developments. How would Adobe take this order from him? Would she defy it? They had in the past reasoned things together and had come to conclusions without one imposing his or her will on the other. Adobe wanted to ignore the other and talk about the Biafran female's attitude. In Lagos, they heard a lot about the girls who turned soldiers overnight and slept in trenches with fighting soldiers. They wondered how a fighting soldier could fight after sleeping with a girl in the trench. Could he have the stamina to run or to fight afterwards? Overnight, the girls in Biafra had been let loose. Their villages had been sacked, their relations killed. They had escaped with sisters or brothers and had fallen on the mercy of Biafran officers who were only too glad to have them as troop comforters and to avoid their brothers being conscripted into the army, had also taken the boys as their batmen. It was therefore not surprising to see more batmen than fighting soldiers in Biafra. One could not blame the girls. They had to survive. At the end of the war, they had to survive the peace. That meant that they had to start all over again, away from it all. So Lagos was a fertile ground. No brother, no sister, no cousin to say to the girls, enough is enough. Why are you prostituting yourself? Go home to your parents. For one thing, there was no home to go to. The war took care of that. The war destroyed family life as the girls knew it. Those in Lagos did not understand. Even Adobe and Mike did not understand. The experience of the war was personal to those who lived it. You had to live through it to understand and to prevent it from happening again if you could. Then Adobe heard Mike saying something to their little girl, and just then the telephone rang. The little girl ran and picked it up. "Who is speaking?" she said in her childish voice. Mike went and took it from her. "You don't say that, young lady. I have told you that you should say your number first. Hello, 2525099. Good morning. Can I speak to Adobe, please? Please hold on." He covered the mouthpiece with his hand and said to his wife, "Your friend would like to speak to you. Do I tell her that you are in the toilet?" "My friend? Which one? Wonders will never cease. Didn't I say that that woman was up to something? Where could she be phoning from this early morning?" said Mike. "Who is it?" Adobe asked again and made an attempt to take the telephone from him. "Your friend Amaka is on the telephone. Can I tell her that you are in the toilet?" "You will not do such thing, Mike. I want to speak to her." "Am I a child? I want to speak to Amaka, please." She emphasized the please. She was angry. Mike surrendered the telephone and stormed out of the bedroom, but he soon returned. "Amaka, how are you? Where are you calling from?" "Adobe," the voice answered. "It's been a long time. How are you? I have been so busy. I have called to let you know that I am now on the telephone and my number is 0011088. Please take it down." "Great," Adobe said. "Amaka, that's wonderful. You mean you have a telephone installed in your flat in Surulere?" "I can't believe it. How did you do it?" "It's a long story, Adobe. I will tell you when we meet. I am traveling to Onitsha tomorrow and will be back before the weekend. I shall phone again when I get back. How are Mike and the children? I hope they are well. Very well. See you when you get back. She hung up and looked at her husband. What is the fuss about, darling? Why are you against her? She has to leave. I don't understand all these warnings about her. Do you want her to disappear from the face of the earth? Is she going back to her husband? Was all Mike asked. Going back to Obiora indeed. How could she go back to him? It is better for her reputation. What reputation? She has no child, Mike. She was a good wife. Her problem with her husband was her childlessness. Haven't you heard? Will the people she is now associating with give her children? Meaning that she is sleeping with all of them. I didn't say that, Mike said. You implied it, and I will answer you. If they will give her children, she will sleep with all of them, one after the other. She will not even care who the father is once she is pregnant. She went through hell on account of this, and she would bend over backwards to have a child from any man, even a beggar from the street. She has come to the conclusion that apart from Obiora, another man, any man, could make her pregnant. In spite of all the gynecologists said, they could be wrong. Miracles do happen even nowadays, Adaobi said. Mike went to work rather late that morning. Amaka was still on his mind. A telephone in Surulere a few months after she had hired a flat. A friend of his had told him that he applied for a telephone 4 years ago, accompanied with a 500 naira bribe, but he did not get the telephone. He kept visiting the P&T, but no telephone. After 2 years, he was written a letter telling him to apply again. He was indignant. What happened to the 500 naira bribe he gave? The man he gave the money to had, they said, been transferred, and a new man had taken his place. He had come with a kind of religious zeal to right all the wrongs of his grabbing colleagues. So he had designed a new form and a new system. Everybody was to be treated alike. There was not going to be any favoritism. No underhand business. The man applied again, but was surprised to be visited by a man who purported to have been sent by the very man who had come to clean up the place. He demanded 1,000 naira. The man gave it to him in raw cash. Why not? If he had a telephone, he could sit down in his house, an office, and do his business. It was costing him time and money to communicate with his business associates both in the country and outside the country. He waited a year, but nothing happened. And now in the 4th year, and having paid 1,500 naira, he had no telephone. The man who had demanded the 1,000 naira was nowhere to be found. When he lodged his complaint to the P&T, he was told that there was no such man. And here was Amaka from Onitsha the other day, having a telephone. How many people was she going to call in Lagos? What were her business connections to demand a telephone? Nigeria was a unique place indeed. Anything could happen, and culprits get away with it. But what could people like Mike do? They were civil servants who were trained by the colonial masters. They found it difficult to work with a new breed who did not know their rights from their lefts. Bribery and corruption was the order of the day. It used to be 10%. Now kickbacks amounted to 30 to 40%. Wasn't it time for people like Mike to think seriously of retiring honorably? People like him were now being relegated to the background. Their opinions did not matter anymore. In fact, they were no longer given the privilege of airing their opinions. Perhaps his wife was right. He had no house at home. He did not even have a plot of land in Lagos. What was he going to do if he was suddenly uprooted from Lagos? He began thinking kindly of his wife. When he reached his office, he phoned her. But he was told that she was not in the office, that she had not shown up that morning. The time was 9:15. Please find out whether she is on a ward round, Mike said in panic. Mr. Man, I have told you madam never come. Abi you know they hear English while they speak. Mike replaced the telephone. That was the language he hated to hear in government circles. What did they teach the children in schools these days? Why did everybody prefer to speak Pidgin English or Yoruba in offices? Were they now going to abolish English in government offices? He was irritable. At 11 o'clock, he phoned again, and again he was told that his wife had not come to the office. "How unintelligent of me," he said, and phoned the house. Adaobi answered, "Darling, you did not go to office. I phoned there." Wonders will never cease. "Mike, when did you start phoning my office?" "Today," he replied. "Love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my..." And she began to laugh. "What's so funny, Adaobi? What has come over you these days? Do I have to start wooing you all over again after 4 children? And why should I not phone your office if I feel like doing so?" Adaobi was calm. Her husband was being worked up. He was up to something, but she did not want to spill the beans just yet. She had made up her mind the day that Amaka told her about her profits. She had realized that they were living in a fool's paradise, living in Ikoyi indeed. Nothing was theirs except their clothes, cooking utensils, and their children's toys. They hadn't even finished paying for their cars, and they were in a military regime where anything could happen at any time. She had made contacts. Her first task was to buy a house. She had not saved much, but she could borrow money from her bankers. She was not all that high in the ministry, and she was married, so the ministry was not going to give her a loan to buy a house. She would use her contact in Lagos and do just that, so that if anything happened, she would find a place for her family. "Darling, I am all right. I didn't feel like working today, so I phoned the matron, and she said I could have a day off. Are you satisfied, darling?" "I am, thank you. But you're not playing trance like the others," he said. He was so beautiful. "Yes, I am playing trance for the first time in years. There are nursing sisters like me who take off for London after reporting sick. The same sisters get promoted when there is a vacancy. And we, the dutiful ones, slave on and stay where we are year in and year out. Just come home, darling. I have a lot of ideas. We cannot continue in this way any longer. We have children to take care of. We are just not alone. We have an obligation to our children. At least, we should give them a decent place to live in and a good education if nothing else." Mike returned home before 3:30, had lunch and went to sleep. That evening, he did not go to the office as usual. He stayed at home and watched television with his family. His mind was working. He hated new ideas, no doubt because of his training, but he agreed with his wife that they must now begin to think about themselves. Contract work was ruled out. He was prepared to consider any other ideas from his wife except that. And it was not difficult for Adaobi to convince him that they must do something for themselves. Nobody would believe that they had been that long in Lagos without a house of their own. Mike was to make contacts as well. Buying a house was cheaper and better. True, they did apply for a land in Lagos, but were not given it. Mike did not believe in follow-up, but you got nothing today from government if you did not follow up an application for a loan or contract or telephone, in fact everything. Mike began to think kindly of Amaka now. If she was instrumental in bringing home to him his past follies, then may God bless her. Why should he think that Amaka was going to corrupt his wife? Mike said so to Adaobi, and she made no comment. She knew what she wanted, and she was going to get it just like Amaka. Whatever method Amaka was using was peculiar to her and her alone. She had made a lot of contacts in Lagos which she had not exploited. She was going to exploit them now for the good of her family. So when Amaka came back from Onitsha, Adaobi paid her a visit. Amaka had never looked better than she was looking that morning. She had gone to Onitsha to see her mother who was ill. Her other sisters were rather busy, and and since she was the only one without a family, so to say, she had to go. Her mother was improving. She had wanted to bring her to Lagos, but she would hear none of it. She wasn't leaving Onitsha for Lagos. She would remain in Onitsha. She said she did not want to die in a strange land. You know my mother. Once she has made up her mind about something, you cannot convince her otherwise. She was at a doctor and she was asked to take it easy. You know she has a big stall in the market, selling clothes of different kinds. But the smuggling, which is rampant in Nigeria today, hinders her business. She is afraid to buy smuggled goods, and smuggled goods are what our people crave for these days. Adaobi was not all that interested in Amaka's trip to Onitsha. She wanted to find out how she was getting on and then make a business proposal. The two friends were eating when Father Mackled came in. "Father, you are welcome," Amaka said and asked him to sit down. Adaobi was at a loss what to say. So Father Mackled visited Amaka at her home. The other day her husband saw Amaka at Mackled's house, and now here he was in the flesh. The father was a bit shy, or so it seemed to Adaobi when he saw her. It was obvious to Adaobi, however, that was not the first or second visit, that Father Mackled was a frequent visitor to Amaka's flat. "Sit down and eat with us, Father," Amaka said, and Adaobi gazed at them both. Amaka had changed a good deal. That was not the Amaka she used to know. But years had separated them, years of frustration for Amaka and years of fulfillment for Adaobi. They were bound to live different lives. They were bound to have different conceptions of life and how it must be lived. Yet, Amaka was at her best. Adaobi was not sure whether her friend expected the father or not. She brought out food and they ate. It was so delicious that Adaobi forgot that she was on a diet. Adaobi asked for the recipe. She always asked for the recipe when she ate something she liked in the homes of her friends. As a good housekeeper, she had different kinds of soup to suit different occasions, and so she endeared herself to her husband. Amaka told her that the fish she used in cooking the soup was bought fresh that morning. That was the difference. Otherwise, she used all the same ingredients as Adaobi. "So you don't put your fish or meat in the fridge?" Adaobi asked. "No, I am alone here with my maid and the market is not far. So when I return from my site, the maid cooks something for me and it is eaten up. But you have a large family and you go to work, so it is not easy for you." Father Mackled ate without talking much. He was an easy sort of person who endeared himself to his parishioners. When he visited them in their homes, he ate with them, and if they visited him and he was at table, they too ate with him. Just as Adaobi was busy rushing all over the place when Amaka visited her home, so did Amaka rush around serving and being a good hostess. Men, Adaobi thought, why should this lovely and homely woman not have a family of her own? Why was this denied her? As they ate, there was a knock on the door and Amaka ran to open it. It was the Alhaji who had helped her get the first contract. The Alhaji liked Amaka very much and had made advances, but Amaka again did not feel up to it. The Alhaji had helped her secure more contracts and had helped in the execution of them, but he had never asked Amaka what profits she made. Amaka had told him about the 3,000 naira she made on the toilet roll deal, but all he said was, "Thank God it is all yours." He did not eat with them, but sat down and was served soft drink while the others ate. Amaka did not want to be involved with the Alhaji. He already had 4 wives. Not that she wanted a husband. No, she did not want a husband. She wanted a man in her life. All women should have men in their lives. The men could be husbands or lovers. The Alhaji did not appeal to her that way. She did not want him as a lover, but she could not yet make a clean break with him. He was precious to her just then. She needed him more than he needed her. She had slept with him, of course, and was not all that thrilled with the experience. There was nothing about it. She was left cold and unsatisfied afterwards. It was like she was with Obiora, because Amaka began to realize during the troubles with Obiora that she no longer wanted him. She no longer wanted to have sex with him. When they did have it, for her it was an act of duty rather than love or affection. Occasionally, the Alhaji visited her, but the visit of that day was the first for some time. Amaka was suspicious. Perhaps he had come to call it quits. Perhaps he was angry with her. The last time he came, she had told him that she was having her period. But the Alhaji was not to be fooled. He asked her whether her period came fortnightly. However, whatever he had come to say, he would not say it because of the presence of Adaobi and the Reverend Father. He sipped his soft drink, and when the others had finished eating, they joined him in the sitting room while Amaka's maid cleared the table. The father was the first to take his leave, followed by the Alhaji, who was somewhat relaxed in the company and promised to call again. Adaobi had come all the way from Ikoyi. She was determined to sit it out with the other guests. When they had all left, both women went into the bedroom. Adaobi was surprised when she saw Amaka's bedroom. She was not going to talk about that then, so she told her at once why she had come. "You talked of your sight," she said. "What do you do there?" "You saw the Alhaji," Amaka began, ignoring the question. "He helped me get the contract. He refused money from me. He wants me. You are married and living with your husband." "Technically, I am married. I spoke to my mother about divorcing my husband, and do you know what she asked me? She asked me whether I was pregnant by another man who wanted my baby. Of course, I said no. Then she said in that case, I should not rush things. I should wait a little longer. But I don't want to wait." "Well, that was just by the way. You know Lagos. No man can do anything for a woman, even if the woman is the wife of a head of state, without asking her for her most precious possession, herself. I must confess to you, I have slept with the Alhaji. There is a lot to be called cash madam. If you can secure a contract through your husband's friend, who you know will never ask for the impossible, I am at your service. I have a site where I store timber and blocks. The Alhaji helped me buy the site. I hope to build a flat on it by the grace of God. When I do that, then I will go home and divorce my husband." To Adaobi, Amaka's story sounded like a fairy tale. In under a year, she had accomplished so much, and she and her husband had been in Lagos for years, and they did not have a plot of land they called their own. "You are right, Amaka," Adaobi said. "I thought of this. No, I wouldn't be able to execute the contract. I would get the contract. Thank you very much. But one thing you should do for me is this. Please never mention this to Mike." "Of course not," Amaka said. "How much did you pay to have your telephone installed?" Adaobi asked. "Well," Amaka began. "Well, all I did was to tell the Alhaji that I wanted a telephone, and in under a week, I had it installed. I don't even know how much it cost." "You have arrived. You are about to conquer Lagos," Adaobi said, and they laughed. "Adaobi, I was wasting valuable time at Onitsha. I should have left my husband after the second year when no child came. Well, God's time is the best." Her friend agreed with her that God's time was the best. They stood talking on the street. Then Adaobi entered her car and drove away. A minute later, Father MacLeod drove in. Adaobi did not see him because she went off in the opposite direction.